Welcome to Your Life Story, brought to you today by the Public Speakers Association. I'm excited to introduce to you our guest star today, Miss Kandy Graves. Kandy, would you take it from here?
All right, I will. I get to talk about myself for a few minutes. That's slightly awkward, but so I was approached by Tanya to just kind of share my story. I know from experience in sharing my story, people are surprised that I'm either not dead or living under a bridge somewhere. And obviously neither one of those things are true. So I was actually born addicted to a prescription pill addict mother in the early 1960s, 1961, the end of 1961. So this was back when this, the whole prescription pill, barbiturate, benzodiazepine revolution, if you will, was absolutely unheard of. But my mom's story is actually really relevant to mine. And she didn't look like a drug addict. She was highly, highly functioning. But I was on the inside watching what she had to do to pull off the life that she lived. And she came by her addiction very honestly. However, she did come from a long line of addicts and alcoholics. In fact, I have a great grandmother, three great grandmothers' diary, and she talks about her husband's abusiveness and his drinking problem. So it goes way back, but she was in a car accident in like 1947, and she had third-degree burns on her legs, and what she was given for the pain was little powdered packets of morphine, and that was the beginning. And so she was 17, and then she was married at 18, and anyway, I am the fourth of the four children, and by the time I came along, she was obviously well into her addiction. She was 32 years old when I was born, and I was born addicted. She was given red, white, and blue pills to take morning, evening, or morning, afternoon, and evening to counteract her nausea, is what she told me. And then I actually got to talk with and interview the obstetrician that delivered me several years later. Anyway, so born addicted and really enmeshed with my mother and completely really unhappy. Part of that was she was incredibly unhappy and very depressed a lot of the time. And she actually was a different person on the inside of the house than she was on the outside. So literally, I watched as she walked out the front door turn into this completely different human. And I remember thinking, trying to make sense of this. And I was like, okay, I took it on, right? I thought, well, somehow something I'm doing out there versus in here is making the difference. And so honestly, my my life was fixated on what could I do to make her happy. And P.S. that never happened. And I remember exactly where I was, driving home to my home with my husband and my three children, about 15 miles away at the time. I remember leaving her house and driving, and I remember the exact spot that I was on this particular road when it just hit me, like hit my brain. I will never be able to please her. And at that moment, I gave myself permission to stop trying. And it was liberating, as you might imagine. I was free. And it really was kind of the beginning for me. And I was 31 years old, right? 31, almost the age she was when she gave birth to me. And that was it. I was now free of trying to please her. However, now, because I had learned and had lived in this depressive state for that much of my life, for 31 years of my life, I had to figure out how to generate my own happiness at that point. And so I moved 1,000 miles away from my mom and my dad, which was life-changing and completely altering and totally changed the trajectory of my life. And so it was necessary for me. I don't know that it's always necessary to have to do that, but I really needed a distinct separation from her. And so that 1,000-mile move was the best thing I ever did. And I still feel that way. I moved from Southern California to the state of Utah, and I still live here today. And I absolutely love it because I'm very much an outdoor person, and it's breathtakingly beautiful here. And I just relish in the beauty and the surroundings that I get to live in. Pinch myself every now and again. Is it real? But as at age 31, I began to think, okay, I have to find my own happiness here. I have to create my own happiness. So shortly after moving to Utah, I remember driving down this road, and we live at the base of what's called the Wasatch Mountains. And I remember driving down this road, and I had an idea or a thought just fall on me. And the thought was, and by the way, this thought came in and I didn't know what it meant, but this is what I heard. I heard study NLP. And I remember thinking, I don't know what NLP is. I don't know what that means. And so that was 1993. And I just took that information in and I thought, okay, that's interesting. Study NLP. I didn't know what that meant. But I moved on in my life for another several years. Actually, 2002, I got exposed to NLP and I became a practitioner. First of all, started utilizing it for myself for healing my childhood, honestly. And so that was a remarkable experience for me. And when I got exposed to it, I was like, oh yeah. And I went back to that time when it's a freeze frame. It's called a somatic marker in the brain. I went back to that moment, driving down that road, and there it was, study NLP. A lot happens to me when I'm driving, apparently. I just thought of that because I was driving away from my mother's house and I got the information. You're never going to please her. And you have permission to stop trying, which was good. And then study NLP just got dropped into my brain. And, so, and in 1993, I couldn't Google it, right? So anyway, my path crossed with it in 2002. Prior to 2002, though, I had a 13-year-old son that I discovered was using drugs, and I remember that day again, another somatic marker in my brain, a total freeze frame. I discovered he was using drugs, and I remember backing up, closing the door to the garage because that's where he was. I didn't say anything. I closed the door, I backed up, and I turned, and I was in my kitchen, and there was a book on the table. And this was, you know, like a book of scripture. And I remember picking that book up, and I was really, really angry, angry at God. And so I picked that book up, and I took it, and I threw it as hard as I could across the room. And it hit my front door, and it landed splat, but open, which is interesting, right? It landed open. I approached the book, and this is what I did. With my fist in the air, I promise it was a fist, no fingers involved, but I did open, I had my fist in the air, and I said, there better be a message for me there. So I got to the book, I picked it up, and my eyes fell to these words. All these things will be for your experience and for your good. And I slapped the book closed. I fell to the ground and sobbed. Whew! That was intense. But that was pivotal. And from that moment until today, and I don't anticipate it quitting anytime soon, I have been on a mission. Excuse the tears, sorry. And that mission is to find healing for myself and to continue providing that the things that I have learned, and providing that for others as well. So I started a business. Again, another one of those experiences where I feel like the information just fell on my brain. I was trying to come up with the name of my business, and there was a scripture that came to mind, which is, as a man thinketh, so is he. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And I remember thinking, oh, I love that so much, because I knew that my thoughts carried energy. And I knew that my thoughts had been very negative and very self-defeating, if you will, for the whole of my life. That my subconscious, programmed by age 7, yours too, was giving me the experiences that I had in my life. And so that's how the name of my business was born, As You Think You Are, because as you think, you really, really are. And so that was born, As You Think You Are, the business was born, and I've done wellness coaching, I guess you could call it. I consider myself a pattern breaker, and I teach others how to break patterns. And it is by entering into the subconscious and going back to these somatic markers, which are literally electrically charged events that have placed a mark literally on the neural pathway. And scientists have been able in brain mapping to see those. Not only do they exist in the brain on the neural pathway, but they actually exist in and around you. We are actually a lot bigger than we appear. We have this auric field, literally a bubble around us. And so with an EEG, they can see these things in the brain and see the energy. But it's also shown in an MEG, which is the magnetoencephalogram, which is it's showing up around each of us. That's how we end up in the same pattern, and or we marry someone with a very similar story, or at least I can do the dance that I know how to do with that person. And so we come together. It's actually a magnetic attraction. We actually come together because it's familiar, right? It feels comfortable because we can continue to do the dance, be the person that we've always been with this person. And sometimes that's a match made in heaven, and a lot of times it's a match made in hell. And I've been married for 38 years, and it's been both. We're still married, and that 13-year-old son is now 37 years old. His brother, just younger than him, is 35 now. He also used drugs and alcohol. Our youngest son did not. He is currently 33. But those two boys showed up with addiction. And I remember thinking, okay, there's mom before me, then there's me, and then there's these two boys of mine. And while I used to be very good at taking responsibility, it's actually over responsibility. I took responsibility for everything. And even the things that were not my responsibility. It wasn't my place to be taking responsibility. So I knew I had some part or some piece in why they ended up addicted. And I can tell you that my mantra from the moment I got married and had children was, I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be like my mom. And I remember one day, again, driving in the car. Yeah, there is a theme going on here. So driving in the car, I was trying to make a lane change, right? And I had turned and looked behind me, and it was safe to make a lane change, but I made a quick look in the mirror, the rear view mirror, to make sure there was no one, in that field of vision. And what happened was I caught a glimpse of the side of my face. And I shrieked because it was the first time I actually saw my mother in the mirror. And I didn't see my mother. I saw my reflection, but I saw how much I looked like her. And it was scary to me. And I just hadn't realized it to that point. So I obviously became passionate once I found out that 13-year-old son was using drugs. And it wasn't too many years later that the second son got into it too. Today, I'm totally, thoroughly happy and pleased to tell you that that oldest son will have 4 years clean and sober come July. And that middle son has 9 years clean and sober in June of this year. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they had a chance at sobriety, a bigger chance, a greater chance at sobriety, because I got my act together. And I took accountability and responsibility for what I could in passing on that pattern. By the way, I want you to know that no parent wakes up in the morning and rubs their hands together and says, okay, gee, how can we screw the kids up today? But every parent does. And the key to that phrase, how can we screw the kids up today, is no parent consciously does that. I never woke up and said, okay, I got to make sure I pass this pattern on. What am I going to do today? Never, right? Remember, the mantra was, I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be like my mom. I had the realization at one point that I was a lot like her. So what I had was the ism, not the alcohol part, but the ism. And the ism is the behavior that is attached to addiction and alcoholism. So it's the ism that I have been voraciously overcoming and acknowledging and changing and studying and providing incredible opportunity for people to overcome their patterns. So I am stating here that you can reach out to me via email and request a free session. I would be more than happy to do that for you. My email address is quantumcoachkandy, and it is Kandy with a K. So it's QUANTUM, quantum, coach, and Kandy, KANDY, at gmail.com. quantumcoachkandy@gmail.com. I'm thrilled to have had the opportunity to share a smidgen of my experience, and truly, I have turned my mess into my message. Thanks.